Our guest speaker is known to all of you, I would think, Bob Stace, a career teacher culminating in a number of appointments as headmaster or principal at various schools around the state. But Bob is also, and has been all his life, a very active member of all the communities in which he's lived. In many aspects, but one of them was as a footballer, where he played a high standard of football wherever he was for many years, until his battered body told him that it was time to move on. But he moved into umpiring, and he had another long career as a football umpire. Just an indication of a person who, wherever he goes, is active in his community. And he joined the Pioneers Association almost a quarter of a century ago, while he was still working. But since his retirement, he's been a very active member of the Pioneers Association. He was president from 2012 to 2016, a council member from about 2010, I think, until 2021. So that's a very long period to be on council continuously. He was the editor of the Pioneer Express, our newsletter, which ran from about 2011 to 2021 before it was changed to one or two other newsletters, and now, of course, we've settled for the moment on What's On. And in 2021, Bob was deservedly awarded honorary life membership of the Pioneers Association. Now, today, he's going to speak to us about a person you all thought was a surveyor, but he's going to talk about William Light, the commander of the Rapid. So, a different aspect of the life of William Light. Thanks very much, Bob.
Thank you, David, and it's great to be back here and see the office. I can actually see some posters and things that I did a long time ago. All those little posters you can see along there with the Duke of York and the Lady Mary Pelham and so on. I actually did those for a similar type of presentation. And it was interesting to hear a bit about my life and career. I've just had my 80th birthday, so it's been a time of reminiscing a bit and hearing some of those stories that David referred to. Now, originally David asked me to speak for about 30 minutes, and I thought, oh, well, yes. But when I heard that we were going to have perhaps a bit of a cramped spot here and that some of you might be perching from the ceiling, I thought we'd cut it back a bit. So we're going to have about 20 minutes, and I don't need to apologise to the people standing at the back or perching on desks because there aren't any, so we can relax a little bit. Now, first of all, the idea for the Pioneer posters began in the latter part of 2013 during a lunch break in the old passer office downstairs in the basement. We used to affectionately call that the dungeon, and it smelt like a dungeon as well. We were so glad to move out of there eventually. But the conversation got around to how can we get our members more involved beyond just attending functions? How can we get our members more involved in function, apart from functions? So someone pointed out that many joined us with lots of knowledge already about their pioneer ancestors. How can we harness this knowledge and put it to good use? My light bulb lit up, and I said, what if we invited them to put this information on a poster? The idea took on. A small committee was soon established to organise the project, and members became very enthusiastic poster writers. We ended up displaying 51 different poster stories in an exhibition in the Mothers Union meeting room 10 years ago during the 2014 History Festival. So that's how it all began. And it's interesting to note that the same sort of formatting that we have today was like the way we started. We gave some thought to that, There was one person who wanted to do her own poster, come what may. She wasn't going to fit into the formatting. So we had this, I don't know whether it's still there, but it was a colourful poster that she designed herself. And so that went up there in a place of glory as well. Okay. So now we have a wonderful resource of over 300 posters, unique ones, special ones, and the ability to put on an exhibition like we have today, which is a themed one. And I'm also conscious that there's going to be a display out at Tea Tree Gully as well. So that was something we thought about even in those early days, and it's great to see it actually happening. Now, this year's exhibition is entitled, as David said, They Came in Ships, and includes posters of pioneers who came on the first 9 ships in 1836. Like the one, I think on here, of Robert Fox, who came on the Buffalo, and it's lovely to see Sue here today because she put her heart and soul into that with her husband at the time. Now, being South Australian pioneers, Pioneer SA members, most of us can list the first 9 ships who arrived in the second half of 1836. They came here, of course, to establish the new colony. And by Proclamation Day, there were about 550 colonists had come in ships to the new province of South Australia. But if you're like me and your memory is not all that great, you sometimes need a bit of a hand to remember those 9 ships and the order they came. And through the good graces of Jill Davy, who was one of the librarians here when I was the president, we have a little ditty, which I'm going to reshare with you. Some of you will have seen this before. The first Duke of York won the heart of the Lady Mary Pelham, much to the dismay of John Pirrie, who nevertheless, and I've added the next bit, at the speed of light, rapidly took his signet ring to give to Emma of the Africaine, who was waving her tam o' shanter at the newly arriving Buffalo. So there it is. And my thanks, I rang Jill just the other day because I couldn't remember it. And you're supposed to remember the things that support your memory, but I couldn't. And she rang me back after 5 minutes when she'd given me the information and said, Bob, how about putting at the speed of light in there? I thought, what a good idea. So that's in there for today. You don't have to remember that bit. Now, one of those 9 ships was the Rapid. And because of my known interest in Colonel Light, David has suggested I focus on the Rapid, which was the 6th ship to depart England and the 4th to arrive in South Australian waters. The Rapid was a brig of 162 tonnes and purchased for £1,700 by the commissioners, especially to cope with the task of surveying the coastline of South Australia. On its journey to South Australia, the Rapid, as we all know, was captained by our first Surveyor General, Colonel William Light. And at this point, I'm going to make a bit of a detour by asking the question, how was Light, who came to Adelaide with his military rank of Colonel and is best recognised in this self-portrait on the left as a staff officer during the Napoleonic Wars, and who fought with considerable distinction and bravery as a cavalry officer during that time and later on during the Portuguese-Spanish Wars of Succession, how and why was he in command of a ship sailing from England to Australia? Or to put it more succinctly, what on earth was Light doing commanding a ship on such a long voyage? Usually you've got to have some sort of experience, some sort of rank. So, just as a by the way, where you see on the slides today any red star, you can say that was that's a painting from Light. He was quite a competent artist, so any images you see on the screen are works of his. Now, William Light was born on the 27th of April 1786, and we still celebrate that in Adelaide every year. He was born in Kuala Lumpur on the Malay Peninsula near where modern-day Phuket is. He was the son of Francis Light, a trader with the British East India Company, and Martina Roselles, a Eurasian or Portuguese Thai descent. At 6 years of age, William was sent to England for his education. 6 years of age, yes. Never saw his father again. His father died a couple of years later. So he's sent to England to stay with a family friend, the Doughties, in their home, Theberton Hall, in Suffolk. And you can see some coincidences there, Theberton Hall in the suburb of Theberton. In his early education, William showed an aptitude for languages and for sketching, and soon developed an interest in boats. In 1800, he volunteered for the Navy at 14, volunteered for the Navy. Now, Hindmarsh actually joined the Navy at 8 years old. He was a powder monkey that used to run between the legs of the gunners and deliver the powder while they were in battle. Hindmarsh. Okay, so he's volunteered for the Navy as a midshipman, learnt the art of sketching even more and of topography, and resigned in 1802 to do other things. And this, of course, was his first formal encounter with the sea. Now, after an adventurous youth, which we haven't got time for today, but it sounds like it comes from the Boy's Own magazines, Light spent much of his next 20-odd years as a cavalry officer, serving with distinction in Wellington's army during the Napoleonic Wars. And he was mentioned in dispatches on many occasions, for his bravery, his ability to map and assess the topography of the battlefield. And on more than one occasion, that ability helped Wellington's forces win the day. He was also very good with his languages and was the only one on the staff to be able to control the fiery Spanish cavalry and also led them into battle. In 1821, shortly after resigning his commission, Light married Miss Elizabeth Poirot of Londonderry in Ireland, and that's where he'd been stationed at that time. Now, little is known of Elizabeth, and sadly she died 6 months into their marriage. So by 1824, at the age of 39, Light marries again, this time to Mary Bennet, who at 19 was half his age. She was the illegitimate daughter of the 3rd Duke of Richmond and the great-great-granddaughter of King Charles II. So she had some interesting lineage there. Light was smitten by Mary, who was considered a noted beauty. He addressed his bride with the following lines. "You say you want not fortune's toys, my angel Mary, nor do I. Content with love and you, our joys shall smoothly glide, nor hear one sigh. With thee, dear girl, my lot's complete." Quite a romantic. Now, Mary had quite a modest fortune, and this with their mutual and influential connections. For example, her sister Caroline was married to Lord Henry Napier. He knew the notable Napier family very well as a result. And this allowed the couple to spend the next decade touring and wandering through Europe and the Mediterranean. They were visiting and enjoying its many cultural sites, and this was Light's second encounter with the sea, when in 1827 he purchased a yacht. With Light at the helm, the couple cruised the Mediterranean and the Golden Era for several years before ending up in Egypt. Now, this is where Light came under the patronage of the Pasha of Egypt. Meanwhile, Mary's rather avant-garde lifestyle resulted in her leaving Light for the younger Captain Bowen. All very interesting times. In 1832, they had agreed to a formal separation, but there was no divorce, and Light received no financial compensation in the marriage settlement. It explains, of course, why when he did come to Adelaide with Maria Gandhi, that he wasn't able to marry her. He wasn't divorced. So he's lost the money that came through his wife, and he was now reliant on employment with the Pasha, which required him to visit England to recruit British naval officers for the Egyptian Navy, which the Pasha at that time was modernising. Now, Light's next important experience as a ship's captain occurred in 1834 when he sailed from London to Egypt in command of the maiden voyage of the Nile, which was a paddle steamer with sails, which had been built for the Pasha's navy. This was a very modern mechanised ship, very different from anything Light had done before, but I think it clearly shows how well he was regarded and the transferability of his many skills. Now, you won't guess this because this is just one of the coincidences of life, but on board the Nile for this voyage was none other than John Hindmarsh, a captain of the British Navy. Now, Hindmarsh had supervised the building of the Nile, and he was heading to Egypt in the hope of being appointed as Admiral of the Egyptian Navy. Now, this did not eventuate, and Hindmarsh, because of his rank, was then given the command of the Nile, with Light as his second in command. History gets repeated later in South Australia, doesn't it? Now, there's not the time this morning to recount the story of the next year, during which Light and Hindmarsh jostled for the position of Governor of the province of South Australia. We all know the outcome, however, and we know that Hindmarsh won the position of Governor of the province, with Light as the Surveyor General. But I couldn't help thinking while I was preparing this, what if Light had won the Governor's position? He was that close. What if he'd won the position as Governor? He wouldn't have had time to survey the city and decide its site, so things would have been very different. It might have been a more of a convivial time in Adelaide at that stage instead of all the arguments, but it's an interesting thought. So now we know of Light's expertise and experience with ships and his appointment as Surveyor General, we can understand why he was about to command the Rapid on its voyage to South Australia. So it's now time to tell the story very briefly of the Rapid, its voyage to South Australia, and its crew and passengers. They came in ships. The Rapid and the Cygnet were to transport the survey party, its equipment and its supplies, and depart mid-March in 1836. There was a rush to get away after the first two ships, the Duke of York and the John Perry, had already departed by the end of February. So it was important to get the surveyors out there to organise where they were going to go. The Cygnet departed on the 20th of March, and aboard was George Kingston, the Deputy Surveyor General, and of course the image of Kingston on the top left is one that was taken many, many years later when he was a significant politician in South Australia. So Kingston's there with the majority of the survey team and most of the supplies. But largely due to Light's illness, now he had contracted TB during his exploits on the continent during his military experiences, and this was progressively worsening at the time. And we all know that was the cause of his death in the end. Because of this, there was a delay in the departure of the Rapid, which didn't leave England until the 4th of May, and it gave the Cygnet a 6-week start. Not a good start to the whole program. Now, the Pioneer SA shipping data indicates there were 24 passengers on board the Rapid, all being adults. Now, other details of the passengers are a little skimpy, and I wrote that before I came here today and saw the folio on the Rapid over here. It's that thick with all the details of the Rapid's passengers, its voyage, and everything you can imagine. And so if you're interested in what I have to say today, certainly have a look at that along with all the other resources. That's great. I'd love to read that through. I'll come in one day and sit down and read it. Okay, so, but we do know that there were 7 persons in superior class and 17 of the labouring class. So that's how they categorised passengers in those days, with most of the members aboard being connected with the survey party. And this has included Dr. John Woodford, again seen in his elderly years, with young surveyors Jacob and Cloughton. Now, also again, the image of of Jacob is in his elderly years. It's also well known that at Light's invitation, Maria Gandy, who was in her mid-20s at the stage, and her two younger brothers were on board. Light had probably met Maria as early as 1832 while staying in the village of Twyford, which is a little west of London near Reading. And this was in between visits he made between England and Egypt on behalf of the Pasha. The only other female on board was Sarah Bradley, who was the wife of the boatswain. Now, this is the only image I know of and I've ever come across of Maria. It's a sketch by Light in one of his portfolios, very, very sketchy. That's her on horseback, and we think it was done around about 1837, 1838. Like many things in Light's life, there's mystery surrounding all this, and I think there will always be mystery. So as far as the crew were concerned, the three officers were selected by Light and well known to him. There was Lieutenant W.G. Field, Royal Navy, as the first officer. Second officer was W.J.S. Pullen, and Pullen went on to become a Vice Admiral in the British Navy. So he had some well-qualified people aboard. Pullen actually did a lot of exploration around Alaska and around the Arctic Circle in the years to come. And R.K. Hill as the third officer. There were 13 members of the ship's crew, with both Light and Woodford later in their diaries attesting to the crew's good conduct on the voyage. The ship was captained by Light himself, the distinguished cavalry officer now commanding the ship on a voyage of nearly 13,000 nautical miles to establish a new British colony at a site as yet unknown. Now, the Rapid with its greyhound figurehead was apparently well named, and the voyage of just over 100 days was both quick and pleasant. And this had much to do with Light's leadership, his skill as a seaman, and his personality. Pullen's record of the voyage noted the affection felt by all on board for their skillful and considerate commander. Geoffrey Dutton, one of Light's biographers, wrote that Light was aware of the necessity of comradeship and for the simple need for people to get along with each other. A great philosophy. It was an harmonious voyage with none of the usual tales of misery, sickness, death, arguments and so on that many others experienced on their voyage to South Australia. Mayo, in his letters and in the life and letters of Colonel William Light, described how the voyage was enlivened by the jokes and pranks of the ship's company, and which Light was ever ready to enter. He writes, upon nearing the equator, Field and Pullen agreed to shave their heads, and the men, not to be outdone by their officers, adopted all manner of shaving eccentricities, and some leaving hair and whiskers on one side of the face only. Hailing an East Indiaman in the tropics, homeward bound from Calcutta, their Captain Owen and some of the passengers were rowed across to the Rapid, where the singular appearance of the ship's company made them doubtful of trusting themselves on board the vessel. Reassured by Pullen as to the sanity of these strange-looking men, they ventured on board and were entertained at dinner. Light used the relative serenity of the 3 months at sea to acquaint himself more fully with the lengthy and daunting instructions from the commissioners about the siting, planning and surveying of the first town. Instructions which were later described as appalling in their magnitude. He spent much time in discussion and consultation with Chief Officer Field on how they might complete the task of finding a new site in such a short space of time. The Rapid arrived in the vicinity of the Murray Mouth and Encounter Bay on the 19th of August, with Light quickly and correctly dismissing this area as a place for a possible port and new town. He anchored overnight in Antechamber Bay and moved on to make a landfall in Nepean Bay on the 20th of August, where he found a small settlement created by the passengers of the Duke of York, the Lady Mary Pelham, and the recently arrived John Pirrie. But there was no signet, which most inconveniently did not arrive until the 11th of September. The map of Rapid's movements over the next 3 months shows the important role it played in locating a safe port and the site for the new town. Light set up a base camp at Rapid Bay. He crisscrossed St Vincent's Gulf looking for the elusive port that had been documented but couldn't be found, and made a dash to Port Lincoln in December prior to finalising the positioning of Adelaide, just to check out its viability. So all that's done in the space of 3 months. The actual decision to put Adelaide where it is now was made a few days after Proclamation Day. So that's and you may well have seen the painting of Proclamation Day that Hill did 20 years on, and lights there in the foreground. But he wasn't at Proclamation Day. He refused to come because he was busy finalising the sighting of Adelaide. So that's the timeline he had, and we all know how over a very short period of time, until the end of March, the town was surveyed. All right, so that's the Rapid's voyage and those who came on her. And this voyage and those who came played a significant and pivotal role in the founding of Adelaide. The decision by the commissioners to give Light full authority to choose the site and then to plan the new town has proven to be most judicious. They came in a ship. Now that I've reminisced over the origins of our pioneer posters and outlined the role of the Rapid and those aboard who came in a ship to South Australia, it's my pleasure to officially open this exhibition and to congratulate the Association for continuing with this great initiative over the past decade. I particularly thank all those members who so proudly have recorded the stories of their ancestors. These posters and the great resources built up by the same Ships Project now provide the Association and all those researching the early years of the colony with a most valuable resource. Our thanks go to those volunteers who have set up this exhibition, and I wish it every success over the duration of the History Festival. I now officially declare They Came in Ships to be officially launched.